Hello everyone, myself Purushotham, working as Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering, MLR IT. In this session, I am going to talk about instance variable. So what is an instance variable? An instance variable is a variable which is declared inside a class outside of the methods or constructor or block. So if you are declaring any variable inside a class directly and outside of the method, so then we will call it as a instance variable. So suppose if you take an example, so here I have a class A, and in this class I declared a variable int A, and this variable is declared outside of the method and inside a class. So now we can say this a variable A is a instance variable. So if any variable, if it is declaring inside a class and outside of the method, is called instance variable. Now, so instance variables are created when object of the class and destroyed when object is destroyed. Means all instance variables always associated with object. So whenever object is created, so your instance variable will be get initialized, and whenever your object is destroyed, all your instance variable will get destroyed. So next point, we are able to access instance variables only inside a class any number of methods. Means, so suppose, so let us take an example. So I have a class and class A, and this A is having a instance variable int I equals to 10. Suppose in your class you may have what? Multiple methods. So suppose let's take public void m1 and public void m2. So in m1 you can access this I variable, and in m2 also you can access this I variable. Means, so once if you declare a instance variable, that you can access any number of methods. So initialization of instance variable is not mandatory here. So initialization is optional for instance variable. Okay. So if you are not initialize instance variable, what will happen means the JVM will be allocate the default values. So the default values concept, suppose if you are using integer variable, it will initialize with 0, default value is 0. If you are using what, double or float, the default value is 0.0, and if you are using boolean value, the default value is a false, and if you are using a string or any class variable, then the default value is a null. So if you are not initializing instance variable, and what will happen means the JVM will be assigned what the default values. So unlike a static variable, instance variables have their own separate copy. So if any changes done in instance variable, that will not reflect on other object. Means, so suppose if you take an example, here I have what, multiple object. I have a class, the class name is a college. So college name is MLR. Let's take an example, MLR, and MLR is having some objects. Let's take S1, student, S2, S3, S4, and etc. Now S1 is object is having name. So let's take an example like Ram, and S2 object is name is Sita. So here if any changes done in one object, that will not reflect here. So suppose assume this name is changed to what, Ram to Ramu. Now this changes will not reflect on other object. So that is the meaning of what this statement means. The static variable will maintain only one copy for all objects, but instance variable will maintain a separate copy for what, every object. So if any changes done in one object, that will not reflect on other object. So instance variable are not allowed inside a static area directly, but using object we can access these instance variables. Okay, so this point I will explain the programmatically little later. So instance variables always associated with objects, and it will store in the heap area. So in JVM we have what the different memory sections. Okay, so in JVM we have what heap area, method area, JVM stack, native method stack, and PC registers. Now where your instance data, where your instance variable will be stored means the instance variables will be stored inside heap area. So these are the JVM memory areas. These are the JVM memory areas. So all your instance variables, all your instance data will be stored inside a heap area. So suppose if I take an example, so here I have a class, the class name is a student, and here I declare the two variables, So first one is a name and second one is a ID. Okay, so name is a string type and ID is a integer type here. So name I initialized with Ramu and ID I did not initialize here. Okay, so if you want to access these variable inside a main method, now the main method is a static keyword, means main method is a static area. So these two are instance variable. These instance variables we cannot access directly. Okay, so if you want to access instance variables directly, the first of all we need to create object to the class. Now the class name is a student, I created object here, and by creating object to the student you can access instance variable, but directly you cannot access. If you are trying to access instance variable inside a static area, it will throw compile time error. So compulsory we should create object to the student class, then only you can access your instance variables inside a main method. So here I created object and s dot name and s dot id. Now here what will happen means whenever you are calling s dot name, so whenever you are creating object, so as we know that your instance data will get initialized. So what is the instance data here? Instance variable name and id. So these variables will be get initialized. Okay, actually here I have not applied the constructor concept. So whenever you are creating the object, the constructor will be called. Inside a constructor actually we need to initialize instance variable, but here directly intentionally I initialized with what some data like ram and default values. So whenever you are calling s dot name, what will happen means it will print ram, and whenever you are calling s dot id, so here I did not initialize this id. Now what will happen means whenever you are not initializing instance variable, the JVM will be automatically, it will add default values. Now the default value of id is 0, the 0 will be print here. Okay, so here initialization of instance variable is optional. Okay, the same points I will explain the programmatically now. So here I will take the same example I am explaining here, string name equals to, I will take ram, and id I will take is a default value. Now, so these two are instance variable and this one is a static area. Now inside static area, if you are trying to access name, so it will throw compile time error. You can see here, if you run this one, you will get a error. See here, non-static variable name cannot be referenced from the static context. So it is not possible. So calling instance variable inside a static area is not possible. So what is the way means? First of all, we need to create object to the class, then only you can access. So here I will create object to the class student, new student, and s dot name you can call. Now this is allowed. Now you can see why we need to create object here means, as we know that your instance variables will be initialized while object creation only. Okay, so this initialization of instance variable must be wait until object creation. So here our object is created, and using this reference you need to call instance variable. Now, so here I initialized it with Ramu, but here I did not initialize this id value. Now what will happen here means it will take the default value. So s dot id, s dot id. Now if you run, now it will print ram and 0. Okay, so here 0 why it is printing means a default value. So JVM automatically it will add the default value. So, that is about instance variable. Thank you.